Okay, so this week we looked at Word, and we've got everything, of course, on Google Classroom. So if you jump onto your Google Classroom, you'll see that all the resources are there. All the resources I'm going to talk about, including the actual training document, which you can go through at home, and the check sheet to actually make sure that you covered everything. Although we are going to cover a few little extra bits and bobs we discussed in session in this video. There's also the actual original files you can make changes to there, and some videos and other bits and bobs as well you might want to go through. So they're all there for you on there. So there's the check sheet I was talking about. That covers everything. Now, you'd be surprised how much we're going to cover. We're going to cover a lot more than just on the check sheet. But the check sheet is the things which are actually given instructions in the actual instruction guide. So I'll drag that out the way. Okay. Now, there's the instruction guide. The instruction guide itself is, I think, about 20 odd pages, 21 pages, yeah. And it takes you through step by step. So we're going to start off with the first thing we're going to look at is the format paint. So that was the first item on the check sheet. And then we're going to look at indenting paragraphs and so on and so on. So I'm going to be reading through or looking at this basically as a reference guide. But as well as that, we're going to be looking at a few additional things as and when they come up, and they're quite useful. So drag that off as well. So the first thing I suggest you do is open a program called Cypress. So Cypress should look originally like this. It's got some pretty well plain text, some images, some tables. So let's start going through with that. So first thing it looks at is using what's called the format painter. The format painter is this tool up here. And what the format painter does is it basically changes a new piece of text based on what you had formatted when you click the button. So if you want to make a consistent layout, such as, for example, you want headings to be the same, you can get one heading so it looks perfect and then highlight even just part of the heading, and then use Format Painter to paste that format to other bits of text. It can be as simple as as short as a sentence, a word. It could be as long as a paragraph or multiple paragraphs. Whatever you highlight will be changed to look exactly the same. Okay, so let me go through a little example here. I've got a heading here which I quite like, which is quite good. So I've highlighted this. Now, by the way, as I say, you don't need to highlight all of it. You just highlight a little bit of it. Don't even need to highlight the capital letter. It will still be a capital letter when you format it in a minute. You click on Format Painter, and then you highlight the other text you wish to look the same. So I'm going to go for this heading here. So that, as you can see, is now changed to that. I'm going to leave the highlight. A little tip for you here. Once I leave the highlighted and click again on Format Painter, I can then go down to any other headings and highlight those, and they will also format the same. So if we click off, you can see that's now formatted the same as that and the original. So that's what Format Painter does. It allows you to format a body of text so it looks the same as another body of text. Okay, so that was the first thing on our list. The next thing we looked at was indenting text. So for example, we got here a body of text. Now, it might look nice if we actually indented that inwards. Now, what indent does basically is to move a body of text in. Now, it only moves in what you're selecting at the moment. So if you're not actually highlighting a block of text like that, if you just have your cursor on a line or a paragraph, when you click the buttons up here to indent, it will only indent that one paragraph, that one sentence, even if that's as small as you've got, or even a heading. So if you want to move a block of text at once and indent it, you need to highlight that block of text. You don't need all of it, so as long as you get at least everything on a line. And then when you click, that block of text will be indented together as a block. Now, of course, if you go too far and it starts affecting things and you're not happy with it, you can use the decrease indent button, which is the opposite. That brings you to the left, and that will give you fine control of where you put your text. Okay, so that's indent. Okay, another thing which you often have issues with is, I mean, I've done it myself many a time. You press the button and don't realize that you've pressed the caps lock button, and then you type a load of text in capital letters, and it's annoying because you tend to just have to delete it, and then when you delete it, you've got to retype it back in again. Now there's actually a little button to change the case being the computer term for the difference between, for example, capital letters, uppercase as we call this, small letters, lowercase, and so on. So the button for that is up here, and if you just drop down the button, we have a number of choices. Let me go through the different choices. So sentence case is where you have the first letter in the sentence in capitals and the rest is small. So an example of that will look like that. And then you got lowercase where nothing is capitals at all. And you have uppercase where everything's capitals, which is pretty well as it was before. And then you got a few funny ones. You got capitalized each word. So each word starts with capital letter and the rest is small. Okay, and you got a weird one, which is toggle case, which is the opposite. So the first letter is small and the rest are all capitals, which I don't know why anybody ever asked for, but somebody must have requested it at some point. So that's the way it's come up. Okay, now this changes depending on what you've highlighted. So notice the word church there hasn't changed. So you have to make sure you actually highlight everything. So if I leave a certain word out, a certain letter out on this occasion, it won't actually change. So I need to highlight everything, and I can change it accordingly. So there you go. So there's sentence case and what have you. And another thing with text highlighted. Okay, I'm just going to make sure that's sentence case. Why is that not? There we go. Right. And another thing is you can change style of writing. You can see what I'm doing. I'm just moving. I'm not clicking. I'm just moving up here, and I'm looking at the different styles of writing. And as I go through from one to the other, some of them are obviously designed for headings, so they're quite big, and others are designed for body text. There's a heading one. That's a body text one, maybe, and you can have different varieties, and it's a good way of finding a nice style for your documents. Okay, now really good for doing things. For example, if I wanted that second or that first paragraph to sort of stand out from the rest, some sort of summary, I can use a different style, and it looks different, and therefore has a different meaning, if you like. So I can decide exactly what I'd like to have. That looks quite nice. That looks like a little summary of the whole document, really. Okay. Then we've got such things as numbering. Now I'm just going to use the same piece of text. Notice now I've ended up with the same piece of text on two lines, but I'm going to show you how to fix that in a minute. So I'm going to highlight that same piece of text at the bottom. Numbering and bulleted lists. Now imagine if you're doing a shopping list and you're going to take it on a piece of paper. You might put a little thing in front, a little sort of shape like a star or something, so you know which each thing is an item. Sometimes things might go onto two lines, so you know where the beginning of a new item is. And that's what a bulleted list is. So if you click bulleted lists, it puts a nice little bullet at the beginning, and then indent a little bit. So we did actually move in a little bit, so you might want to reduce the indent as a result. But if you choose the drop down button, you actually get a whole variety of different shapes. So for example, you can have nice little sorts of decorative, you can have a little tick, you can have arrowheads, and you can just use traditional button or some sort of variant of the traditional button. Okay, so that's buttons. Likewise, we've also, for if you want a numbered list, so a numbered list is where you have to do things in order, and so number one, then number two, then number three. So numbered lists traditionally if you just click on the button, you just have the basic list. But again, click the down arrow, you got a whole variety of different. So you can see that you got different sorts of variations. You can use letters, capital letters, small letters, and so on. Okay, very useful again when you're organizing yourself. So one of these things which you can use quite successfully, really, when you wish to organize things. Now, columns. Now, columns are one of those things which everyone seems to think it's quite difficult. So if I wanted to, for example, have that piece of text there as two columns, and automatically, by the way, it will balance the columns. So the text equally goes across the two columns, and you don't end up with a lot on one side, not as much on the other side, or vice versa. So if I highlight the text and I go to the layout menu, I can choose the down arrow and choose how many columns. Now notice by default, you've got one column, which is basically start on the left-hand margin, go to the right-hand margin. So by changing to 2, I'm just simply breaking that into two separate columns. Okay, and if you want more control, if you go to the columns menu and choose the bottom option, which is more columns, you get a drop-down menu which allows you to do things. For example, put a line in between. So now it's going to have a nice little line just breaking up those two columns. So columns are quite straightforward as well. Okay, now in the text at this point it talks about doing tabulation, putting tabs in, left tab, right tab, and all the rest. I personally don't use tabs anymore. I find that they're pretty well old-fashioned in regards to the abilities, and very much superseded by the ability to use what we call tables. And a table is very similar to creating, a table in spreadsheets with columns and rows and being able to make it look pretty and what have you. So if you go to the insert menu, you'll be able to see that you've got a table option here. And the table option just allows you to decide how many rows and columns you're going to have. So I'm just going to go what we call a 3 by 3, so 3 columns by 3 rows. Okay, and then I'm going to choose a bit of text. Now bear with me while I type a bit of text. I might speed this bit up. So I'm sticking to the theme of holidays. And I'm just going to go for some star ratings. So a 2-star rating and a 4-star rating. Okay, and then low season, let's say it's going to cost you £350. In low season for a 4-star, it's going to cost you, say, £650. Keep the math simple. And I'll just reproduce that. And the most expensive holiday high season for 4-star, £1,100. There we go. So I've created that. Now, just because I've created it doesn't mean I can't do anything with this. I can, for example, go in and change the styling. I don't know if you've noticed, but up here, there's a whole variety of predefined designs for your chart, for your table. Okay. Now, you don't have to just choose the ones you've got on the display. There are many, many others, so you can choose whichever you like. You can still see a design there. It does get a little bit in the way, the menu. Okay, and you can choose all sorts of designs, probably without going too sort of striking. So I'll probably go for something like that, just to show how it works. And making your table bigger or smaller, simple technique to do that is the little pull out here, little box, and you can use that to, for example, make your table slightly bigger or whatever size you want. You can play around with this. You can actually use it to make your table smaller, or bring it out. Or you can bring it out to whatever size you like. Okay. So I think we've pretty well covered everything there. That's the whole book. Now, what we then did was we got you to go on to creating a new file called Oscars, and what I've got is the original file there. Okay, and with using those techniques, you can modify it to this file. Voila. So there we go. What we've done here is we created 3-column layouts. We've left the first paragraph like that as a sort of main heading. I've used different styles to create a heading. I put a page border in, which I've not talked about so far, so I'll leave you for that. So it's a little challenge. I've put in images. Now, the interesting thing with the images, see that image there and that image there in particular, is what I've used for images is I've gone to layout and I've chosen the square or the tight. Square basically allows text to wrap around, and tight wraps it around as tightly as it can. So when I use the tool options and use either square or tight, it allows the text to wrap around the image itself. Whereas normally I've probably shown you in the past how to use in front of text, which allows text to physically go behind the image. But on this occasion, I'm going to use square and tight to make it look like that. And there you go. If you want me to just very quickly show you what the original looked like, I think I've got it still here. There we go. looks a bit boring, and the final product looks reasonably similar to like a newsletter.